Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be joining you today from the traditional territory of Treaty 6, and I'd also like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a very deep connection with this land. As we have been hearing from Alberta families across the province, inflation is hurting. Whether it's gas, whether it's groceries, whether it's utilities, whether it's saving for tuition, costs on every front are skyrocketing. This morning we heard from StatsCan that Canada's inflation rate has now hit 8.1%, which of course is the highest it's been since 1983. But here in Alberta, we know that that number is even higher, at 8.4%, the highest amongst the 4 comparator provinces. At the same time, Alberta is experiencing the lowest rate of wage growth of any province in the country. So overall, what we know is that Albertans are finding they just have less and less buying power at the end of every month, and it's creating higher levels of stress. So while inflation is a crisis all across this country and indeed across the world, we also know that the UCP over the last 18 to 24 months have made a number of decisions that are making this problem worse. They've raised personal income taxes, they've raised property taxes, they've raised school fees, they've raised tuition, they've raised interest on student debt, they've raised camping fees, they've raised utilities, they've raised car insurance. So the bottom line is this. Today we are calling on the UCP to take this problem seriously, to reconvene the legislature and undo the hurtful policies that they have put in place that are making life so difficult for Alberta families. We would be happy to work with them on it. We hear 1 or 2 of their leadership candidates are even finally, after pretending that these policies were good policies, are now themselves running on reversing them. So if they're serious about it, they will join our call to come back to the legislature and actually make the changes that will ensure that Alberta families have a little bit more in their pockets at the end of each month. This issue can't wait until October or November or whenever this current chapter of the UCP internal drama gets resolved. This issue has to be addressed now. Families need help. An Alberta NDP government will always be focused on keeping money in the pockets of Alberta families and doing everything we can to make life better. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Rachel. As always, if you're joining us on the Zoom, you can use the raise hand function to join the question queue or press *9 on your telephone keypad. But we will start with questions from those in person today.
So did I hear you say that you want the legislature recalled sooner than the October start date? And if so, what exactly could they do? Because the Bank of Canada's projections say inflation's not going to come down to 3% till 2023 and not down to the target till 2024. So as you mentioned, nationwide problem. What can the legislature do if you recall it early?
There's a whole range of things the legislature can do. For instance, the UCP actually ran in 2019 on a commitment to index a whole range of income support payments and child tax credits and family tax credits. And then almost within 6 months, they broke that promise by legislation and de-indexed them. So re-indexing them is one thing that they could do right away. And that would have a significant impact on a number of not just those families that rely on income support, but also those who rely on the seniors benefit, senior supplement, and also those families who benefit from the child tax credit. So that's the first thing they could do. They could also re-index the personal income tax brackets. That is something that they did by way of legislation, and when they undid it, and of course they're collecting almost $1 billion a year extra now as a result of that. They could put the cap on electricity was a legislative piece. The cap on insurance was a legislative piece. The cap on tuition fees was a legislative piece. All of these things were were there, and now they've reversed them. So these are things that the government can do immediately to address the challenges that Albertans are experiencing. We understand that there's a point beyond which government actions might drive inflation, but these are not within that sphere, and they have a dramatic impact on folks' abilities to make ends meet at the end of each month.
And Minister Schweitzer has said, hey, there's been tremendous job growth. There's been a record number of businesses incorporated. I mean, isn't having some income better than none?
Listen, all of Canada is experiencing an economic resurgence right now. And Alberta is no different than that. So while there are more jobs being created in Alberta, that's great. The fact of the matter is that Alberta lost more jobs during COVID as well. So it's good that the economy is taking off. We appreciate that, and I'm not surprised to hear Minister Schweitzer talking about that. But that doesn't deal with the fact that Alberta's inflation rate is even higher than the national average. It is the highest amongst the 4 comparator provinces that the UCP likes to use as a guide. And Alberta's wage rate is growing at a much lower rate. So what that means is that there is a real impact to the buying power that Alberta families are experiencing right now. And again, as I say, the UCP can act to mitigate the multiple ways in which they have downloaded costs onto Alberta families over the course of the last 2 to 3 years.
We do have our next question comes from the phone lines. Caller, when you hear your line is unmuted, you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
I was just wondering whether Central Albertans should be concerned with the increasing inflation rate and how that might impact the expansion at Red Deer Hospital.
So you're asking about the inflation rate impacting the expansion of the Red Deer Hospital? Is that correct? Yes?
Yeah.
I think, we do know that the cost of government projects will likely go up as a result of the increased inflation. But we also know that government coffers are experiencing remarkable amounts of money right now as a result of world events. And of course, capital investment is not operational. And so it's not unreasonable that we would be able to continue with projects that had been committed to. It is so clear to us that the people of Central Alberta need greater investment in their health care. They need greater investment in the Red Deer Hospital, something that we committed to when we were in government, something that the UCP is originally delayed but appears now to be moving forward on. And then, of course, that needs to be paired with adequate resourcing of the healthcare system on an annual basis, because we know there's incredible pressure, and it's just not acceptable that people who live in Alberta's 3rd largest city have to leave the city for basic surgical care and emergency surgical care. That is a sign that there's a problem in healthcare, and the government needs to acknowledge it and focus on fixing it.
You have a follow-up, caller?
No.
Okay. Our next question comes from Madeline Smith, the Post Media. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Okay, great. So I just want to understand, so you're calling for the legislature to be reconvened, and what you would be looking for is essentially returning, and then for the government to pass a series of legislation, or what would happen after it would come back before fall?
The idea is to bring it back, to have them address what is a growing inflationary crisis for Albertans. We can't wait. Families are telling us they cannot wait for the UCP to get their internal house of drama in order. And they need some basic things. And there's some basic things that we should be able to all agree on. As I've said before, we've already got a couple of UCP leadership candidates who appear to be forgetting their record over the last 36 months with respect to some of these policies, who are now calling for the reversal of those policies. We think that's what should happen. We think there should be immediate action to support Alberta families. And waiting till October or November or perhaps even into the spring is going to hurt Alberta families. We can't afford to wait any longer, and the government needs to acknowledge that the inflation in Alberta is amongst the worst in the country, and that our wage growth is amongst the lowest, or is the lowest, and therefore there is really an urgent need for them to take action.
Okay, and unrelated today, I'm also wondering whether MLA Thomas Dang is going to be allowed back into caucus.
Well, as I've said before, we have a process to go through, both in terms of meeting with the caucus and with the executive meeting. They are, I believe, waiting on a bit more information, and so the process is still underway, and we have nothing new to add right now, but we'll be certain to let you know when we do.
Thanks, Madeline. I'll come back to reporters in person.
Rachel, what information are you waiting on? Thomas Dang, are you waiting to see if he pleads out to this health charge?
Well, the matter's still before the courts, and so the way in which it's addressed within the courts is certainly one of the issues, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I'm still on that matter. I'm still trying to parse out who knew what and when. So I know that your staff brought this forward to Alberta Health in September. At that point, had Thomas Dang told your staff that how he verified it, that it wasn't just a member of the public that said, hey, there's something wrong, but that he himself had hacked into the website?
As we've said a number of times, what happened in September was Thomas advised our office that he'd been given a tip or something that there was a vulnerability, and as you may recall, there was a lot of conversation about that on social media, separate and apart from Thomas or anybody else. So anyway, and so he had tested it, and then immediately told us that it did seem like there was that vulnerability, sort of equating it to he'd been told there was a hole in the wall, and he went to that hole and he looked at it. That is the degree to what we knew. We didn't know any of the kind of detail that's since come out. What we do know, though, is that within an hour of that conversation, the minister's office was contacted and advised of the vulnerability. And frankly, most of the information that's come out since comes as a result of us disclosing what we knew at the time.
But you knew in September that he had tested it?
That he tested it, yeah, but we didn't know what that meant. We just, yeah.
Just follow up on that. Did you feel like that he was being full and frank with you, that you got all the information you needed from him, or was he trying to hide his actions at all?
At the time, it was something that came and went so quickly. I didn't. What we knew was that as I said, there'd been a public conversation about the vulnerability. Thomas, with this background, came to us and said, "I got a tip about it, and there really is a vulnerability." And so we really dispensed with the issue once we'd contacted the minister's office. It was like, okay, we passed that information on, the end. And I didn't have reason at that time to question further about it.
Let me rephrase it then. Do you feel like Thomas Dang gave you all the information he should have given you at the time, given what you know now?
Given what we know now, we would have liked to have gotten more information at the time, absolutely.
So would you say he wasn't full and frank with you at the time then?
I would say I would have liked to have gotten more information at the time.
Because if he's not obviously being full and frank with the leader of the party, I mean, do you really want that kind of a person carrying your banner in the election?
Well, as I say, that we are having conversations about all these issues, and we're going to see what comes out of all of this, and we'll have more to say when we're done.
Rachel Notley still has to sign off at the end of the day, right?
That is quite true.
So where are you right now at that? Do you still need more information, or?
I'm respecting the process, and we'll have more to say when we're done.
Dean? We're just going to come back to the phone lines. Michelle Bellefontaine, CBC. You're unmuted. Go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, Rachel. I just wanted to follow up on something you just said. you were talking about the information you received from MLA Dang in September, and you just said that I had no reason to question it at the time. Why didn't you? Like, wouldn't that have raised questions with you that he said he tested the site? Did you not want to know how and what he did?
Honestly, it came to me through other people. My concern was resolved when I was told that the information had been passed on, and maybe I should have, who knows, but the bottom line is I don't typically engage with my caucus by saying, that's an interesting piece of information you've given me. I'm now going to cross-examine you for 30 minutes because I don't believe I have a reason to trust you. So, it was something that happened very quickly. It was in the midst of a whole other conversation that was online about the vulnerability of the website, which was being repeatedly talked about and I think reported on even in the media. As soon as I was told that, the minister's office has been advised, I really moved on to the next issue.
But from an issues management standpoint, Rachel, I mean, if this had happened with the UCP and you guys had learned that a UCP backbencher had somehow gotten into the website, you guys would be all over this, right? And so I guess that's where we're sort of really not understanding that somehow this didn't twig questions in your mind. And why wouldn't you cross-examine one of your MLAs when it comes down to your party's reputation?
Well, to be clear, what I said is he tested it. This whole concept of getting into the website is a bit of a different concept than he tested it. And to be clear, Michelle, I think it's really important to remember, unlike a number of UCP MLAs who have actually been charged with, investigated with breaches of different pieces of legislation, in some cases charged with significant fines imposed, in other cases subject to RCMP investigation. Thomas Dang was removed from our caucus the minute we discovered the breadth of this. So I think that there's not actually a similarity there because we've handled it very, very differently. Should we have asked more questions then? Maybe. But the fact of the matter is when we discovered the seriousness of it, Mr. Dang was out of our caucus that day, as opposed to numerous UCP MLAs who are still within the UCP caucus right now.
Right, and our last question today comes from Janet French, CBC.
Hello there. I'm just wondering, Dang has admitted to the techniques that he used to try and, quote, test or challenge this vaccination website. What is it that you could possibly learn at this point that would make his actions okay, sending millions of requests, rerouting his IP address to hide his identity? What would you hear that would redeem him in your eyes?
Well, as I said, we have a caucus process and we have an executive process, and we are still deliberating through those processes, and I'm going to respect that process, and I will wait for that outcome. And then when we have it, we'll let you know.
Right, okay. But as Dean mentioned, you hold the pen. So, I mean, what is it? Is it just a matter of time until you feel like you can say that? Or is there some redeeming quality in all of this that you think would still leave him as a suitable candidate for your party?
Well, again, this is quite hypothetical, and I may hold the pen, but I also am a leader of a caucus, and I also sit on an executive or have a relationship with the executive, and they have a process in place, and we will be happy to advise you the outcome once we've been through that.
So, Rachel, that's the question. Who makes the decision? Who decides fate of Thomas Dang?
There are different decision makers, as I've said. The caucus makes recommendations. The executive will consider the recommendations of the vetting committee, and so it's made at different levels. No.
Someone's got to decide. So who decides? You, the table officers? Is it the table officer vote? Is it a full executive vote? You must have a process in place to decide what happens with Thomas Dang.
I thought I described it. So.
You talk about recommendations. I'm asking who makes the decision.
The executive makes the decision on vetting at a meeting, just the way most people do. It varies. I suppose technically, if it were to get really combative, it might be a vote. But generally, the table officers confirm vetting decisions, and caucus. Sometimes, we typically try to be primarily consensus-based in how we make decisions, and that's a process that I respect. Respect the views of my colleagues, and so that is what we are in the midst of right now.
So there's no actual on-paper process. We're just going to figure out.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes today's news conference.
Thank you.
Much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.